Welcome to episode 22 of the Never Board of Trade podcast. Welcome back. I'm Jaipaul.
I'm Vijay.
And behind the keyboard there is Josh, bringing this all together for y'all. And really excited. A lot to talk about this week.
A lot of news, yeah.
Yeah, so to help people along, we're actually going to try to put a little bit of structure to this.
Yeah.
But before we begin, I realize we should be acknowledging this is the first episode of this podcast.
Yes.
If you're listening, you heard a musical intro to this podcast. And so for that, we were really excited to thank Derek Azevedo of Dazzler Music for putting this together for us. We have a musical intro now.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, so we're really excited. We're upgrading as we go along, and now putting a little bit of structure to the podcast as well, because we have so many awesome listeners. We want to try to raise our bar a little bit as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So today, just to help people along, we had a couple things that we discussed we want to talk about. The new auto strategy dropped about an hour ago.
Hot off the presses, yeah.
So some initial response to that, because I think there's a lot of impact and interest in Brampton.
For sure.
We want to talk about the municipal budget, which has been a process through the month of January, and it's scheduled to be officially adopted tomorrow. So I think we sort of our final thoughts on the budget process and what that looked like in Brampton. I want to talk a little bit about some new developments, residential specifically in Brampton, but some perspective on what that looks like that's happening here in the northeast part of the city. And then if we get some time, just sort of talking in general about some observations you and I have made on a few different fronts about data, reporting, information around Brampton, not narrative storytelling, but the numbers that help drive some of the conversations we have. And then there's some stuff happening GTA-wide in general politically, and may have some ramifications to Brampton that if we don't talk about today, I'm confident we'll be talking about in the future, but lots to dig into.
Excellent. Right. So let's start with the auto strategy.
You kick off. Yeah, I got lots of thoughts. I made some notes, but why don't you take the first stab at this, because I'll have lots to say.
For sure. So literally a few hours ago, the federal government announced Canada's new national automotive strategy. And this, of course, comes off the heels of this very polarizing trade deal with China in exchange for access to canola. We are importing about 49,000, maybe 50,000.
That's right.
EVs from China.
Scaling up to 100,000 over the next couple of years. It is a process that scales. It's not one time. That's right.
Yes. And this, of course, on the ground in Brampton, the reception has been mixed, especially in the context of some troubling news about Stellantis and the status of the workers at that plant. There are some questions about the specifics of this EV deal, but Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke to reporters in Woodbridge today. He says that Canada will scrap that electric vehicle mandate, that Trudeau era policy to shift all new cars to 100% EV by 2035. Instead, he's returning to EV incentives for consumers.
We're moving to carrots, not sticks, it sounds like.
Yes, exactly. Which is great. I mean, the industry seems to be responding quite favorably to this. And so the 5-year program will give individuals and businesses up to $5,000 when they buy a battery, electric, and fuel EVs, and up to $2,500 for plug-in hybrids.
That's right.
So, what are your thoughts on this?
I think there's a lot there. Yeah. So if I can dive into some more of the detail. First off, I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if you got a chance to read the strategy document that the government put out, or if you're reading the news reviews, but I had a chance to kind of cram in both a little bit. A few things. One, I thought was fascinating that when I went to Google Canada auto strategy before jumping onto this about an hour ago, I got as far as Canada, and the autocomplete on my search engine put in auto strategy. So clearly, it's the story of the day.
Oh yeah,
because Google was telling me this is what I wanted to read.
Yeah. Okay.
And I also thought it was fascinating that the landing page of the New York Times right now, the top story is Canada's auto strategy, and it's a picture of Mark Carney and Flavio Volpe.
Oh wow!
And so this is a news story in the U.S. as much as it's a news story in Canada right now.
Oh, cool!
Which I thought was really interesting. Go to the New York Times. It's the lead story in the New York Times right now.
Yeah.
But no, I thought it was fascinating, and a couple things there. So, taking a step back from the mandate toward electric vehicles and moving more to incentives. So now no longer 100% by 2035. I believe it's 90% by 2040 is the objective. So I appreciate that the government is still committing to a long-term strategy that is prioritizing sustainability through electric vehicles, but allowing industry to take a little bit more of a lead and allowing consumers to have a little more voice in this.
Yeah.
But I'm appreciative that the targets are still now. I don't think there's any consequence of not hitting those targets, but I appreciate that there's still something aspirational here to be had. That there's a lot of incentives, not just at the consumer level, but massive tax credits, including a super deduction credit for businesses, for manufacturers who are making investments in creating electric vehicles.
That's awesome.
Okay, so
great.
huge tax breaks.
Yeah.
There's $3 billion worth of incentives available, opportunities for clean tech tax credits as well. So there's a lot of moving parts here to incentivize industry to move in this direction. So it's not, I feel like they're trying to put a little bit of meat to this. And I think it's also interesting in the context of the Chinese vehicle piece. You and I had an opportunity to speak to our colleagues at Unifor earlier this week. And they're among the parties, I think rightfully so, that expressed some concern about the Chinese deal.
For sure.
Because right now, there's nothing that creates Canadian jobs out of this. It's an opportunity for Chinese-produced vehicles to be sold in Canada, not for Chinese vehicles to be
spread their supply chains.
Precisely. So I understand that Unifor is a little bit concerned there. I thought it was interesting, therefore, it seems like there's clearly some carve-outs in the strategy for them as well. A lot of resources being put toward reskilling and retraining, a lot of pieces in the document around trying to create more incentives for production and supply chain to be in Canada, including a credit scheme that basically, it sounds almost like a carbon credit scheme there, where by having elements of your supply chain in Canada actually provides you as a manufacturer with credits that you can utilize to expand your operation and apply for other incentives through the government. So they're really trying to build out. And I think even when it comes to the consumer part of it, that $5,000 tax credit or $2,500 for the hybrid does not apply to the Chinese vehicles. So they really are trying to reinforce the notion that these are going to be North American and ideally Canadian produced vehicles, trying to strengthen the supply chain here in Canada, trying to protect Canadian jobs while giving Canadians more electric vehicle options and our economy less reliance on US manufacturers. Because we know in addition to China that the Prime Minister has also had conversations with South Koreans about bringing, I believe it's Kia, to Canada as well. So I think a lot of interesting pieces here for us. And in Brampton, we had our State of the City luncheon earlier this week. A lot of topics. I know we'll talk about it later, probably get to budget as well. But the mayor was quite vocal in the room to say,
very supportive.
we want to see nothing less than automobiles produced in that Stellantis plant here in Brampton, and that the city of Brampton stands with Unifor in trying to get those jobs back into this community. So a lot of good news here potentially for Brampton coming out of this, if the levels of government are all similarly focused on trying to create those automotive jobs and the supply chain in communities like ours.
I'm glad you mentioned Unifor. We haven't yet spoken to our colleagues there about this auto strategy. I am keen to hear their perspective on this. But in your opinion, do you think this quells any of the concerns about the Chinese deal? Is there more to be done? Or does this feel like an industrial policy around EVs?
It feels like that's where we're going with this. And I obviously don't want to put words in their mouth. And had we had more time, I definitely would have had that connection. I think let's make sure we bookmark that for the next one is let's have a further debrief. I did think it was wonderful to see this document released because among the takeaways from our conversation with the folks at Unifor this week was their stated desire to see a national auto strategy.
Exactly.
So that they could have something to respond and react to and provide commentary. Clearly, one of the frustrations for them was the lack of clarity on what the federal government's vision was. So if nothing else, I think they have to be happy that there's a document out there now that they can respond to. But as a layperson, I see the only upside here. This is not a short of a government bailout to go and entice Stellantis or GM or Ford to build a traditional North American vehicle in Brampton. This is, I think, as close as you can get to that. We're going to put every incentive in place. We're going to try to decouple our supply chain from being as affected by the U.S. They're still maintaining, and we didn't get into all the details, but there's language in there to, which is really great for Ontario, because not only the commitment to vehicles, but specifically electric vehicles, then allows us to enhance our industry around critical minerals and the whole Ring of Fire infrastructure that's being built here in Ontario, battery production, all these ancillary pieces as well, in addition to vehicle assembly. To me, this feels like a lot of opportunity to protect the investments that the province has made and that the feds have already made in Ontario, and create more job opportunities. Like the language stated in there is to protect Canadian jobs. And as I said, like the first statement in the document, Canada will remain a nation that builds cars. That's literally the first statement in the strategy. And if I'm from Unifor, I'm sure the devil's in the details.
Yes.
And it's all in the timelines.
Yeah.
And it's in how many dollars. But strategically, it feels like all the right words and the right ideas are being put on the table.
Totally.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm no expert on this, and what I'll say is I'm glad to see this kind of policy being pursued. This to me is inching towards this broad-based industrial policy that we need from this government. That I think this context in the post-COVID context and protectionism from the United States, all of these factors adding up together means that we are, to borrow Prime Minister Carney's words, taking the sign down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not only the multipolar nature of the world that we live in, but it's also the way that domestic priorities are set and the willingness to utilize the power of the public purse to provide the incentives to create domestic industry. So this is the kind of policy I want to continue seeing. But to your point, devil's in the details.
Yeah. And two other points on that before we get in. I have another question for you. Is two other things that again, initial reading, the document hasn't dried yet. I really appreciated that within the document was indicated as well that there's a commitment to consultation with industry regarding the next steps, and particularly in the area of labor. One of the criticisms, at least for me, I think you share it, with this new government that we have here, is even when the policy direction seems to be the trajectory that we want it to be, under the desire for expediency, we've carved out a lot of what would traditionally have been in place for consultation. And we saw with the previous government, under the Trudeau regime, particularly in the area of international students, and foreign workers, things of this nature, like the whole immigration thing fell apart because there was no consultation to understand the ramifications of the decisions that were being made. So the fact that they're even acknowledging that consultation needs to be part of this process is very heartening to me. Again, let's see if they follow through. And to your comment around the broad industrial policy piece, one of the things I thought was really interesting in this document as well is in the section that talks about labor and workforce, it actually references the fact that this is going to, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is also going to be complemented by the soon-to-be released defense strategy. So they're seeing this piece around protecting Canadian jobs, both within the auto sector, but also taking those skilled trades and skilled individuals who are in the auto sector and also giving them opportunities through reskilling and other mechanisms to participate in other aspects of the economic strategy that they're building out in other sectors. And the notion that they're even thinking about these things, not in silos, but as complementary to one another, again, I think these are good signs. And, we talk a lot about automotive in Brampton. There are a lot of defense opportunities in Brampton, from everything from vehicle manufacturing to aerospace to telecommunications to cybersecurity. Recognizing that that's an industry that the government is building a strategy around that involves job creation, I think is also great for a community like ours. So for me, this is a really a day for some optimism. Not a day to celebrate, but it's a day for some optimism.
For some optimism, for sure. Especially, and the reason why I say, like I mentioned, a broad-based industrial policy is this is the sort of thinking that I think we need to apply to some other wicked problems that our country has been facing. Just a few days ago, the government also announced the grocery and essentials benefit, which is essentially a GST top-up. So I think it's increased 25%. A family of four will receive $1,400 annually. A single person will receive $700. Not disparaging that policy choice. I think it's great. it's being rebranded as a groceries benefit. And I think if we wanted to address the problem of food insecurity and exorbitant grocery prices, there is something more systemic required that involves an industrial policy.
Yeah.
And Avi Lewis, who is the front runner for the NDP federal leadership, he has put forward the idea of a public grocer.
Yeah.
And I'm very compelled by that. Zoran Mamdani also mentioned
I was thinking this is very Mamdani. I love it.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting. Mainly not because we're looking for the government to replace Loblaws and Sobeys and Walmart and Costco. It's more that if you have a public option, like in many other industries, you bring the overall prices down.
To me, this is it's easy, and unfortunately, we use terms like socialism as a four-letter word in North American context, and I think an idea like this is going to have to go through a lot of challenge because it's going to be perceived as handout. It's going to be perceived, at your point, stifling a competitive free market and so forth. But to me, this is analogous to how we look at things like transit and healthcare.
Yes,
right. There are options out there that are privatized. There are options out there that are free market.
Yeah,
you can still go drive a car if you want. Yeah. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to take a bus?
Yeah.
You can still go out and go to Cleveland Clinic or wherever it is, your private healthcare provider. But isn't it good to know that there's an option here for you that's going to make sure that your healthcare needs are met at a world-class level without you having to open up your pocketbook? I think grocery to me is no less essential than the ability for you to move around your community or to have healthcare for your family. Why would we not want to make sure vulnerable people in our community are looked after? To me, it makes so much sense, and I don't think it's predatory at all. It's about how you execute it. But ensuring that people have options is, I think, the role of government at the end of the day. It's to facilitate.
Yes. Right? Correct market failures, but more meaningfully, protect the welfare of the citizenry. So,
On this issue around when you talk about, we're contextualizing this in the context of we're contextualizing this as economic policy and thinking about, the ramifications as it pertains to job creation and so forth. But that's really almost like a face value reading of it, to say that this is in fact what the government is looking to do. There is a version of analysis to this that this has nothing to do with industrial policy. It has much more to do with negotiations around CUSMA and the United States, and appearing strong at the bargaining table as we head into those conversations with the U.S. and Mexico about what is going to be under free trade within the continent. Any thoughts on that piece? Do you take this at face value as being economic policy that we're developing here, or is this about something else, or is it a little bit of both?
No, I think it absolutely is a little bit of a posture in our negotiations with the United States. Absolutely, I think Prime Minister Carney has admitted as much, that when negotiating with Donald Trump, you cannot show weakness, and you have to show a level of autonomy. And I think the Davos speech was an example of that. It's not. I think there was a part of me that felt maybe we're poking the bear too much. And even with the Ford ad, right? I think one of the reasons why the Prime Minister didn't come out and rail against the Premier.
Oh, he loved it. He had to love it.
I'm sure he loved it. But if you sort of negotiate from here, then all of a sudden, going down to here feels a little bit more manageable.
Oh, right? Absolutely. No. I agree. I think it is a little bit of both, and I think it's the right thing to do. And I think the line that was utilized in the document is, this is what a confident country does.
Yes.
And I think so. Whether it's about carving our own path for economic independence in this sector, or whether it's about coming to the bargaining table with a hand that we feel is a strong one, it's the same, and both of those things are wins.
Yes.
So I see it as a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And even if it results in not a win at CUSMA, but results in a more strengthened global supply chain that Canada can operate and participate in the long run, that's still a win. So I do think there is a gamesmanship piece here too, but I don't think that comes at the expense of good policy here. Again, let's see how it gets enacted, but for reading a document that's only been out for an hour and we haven't reviewed anyone else's analysis, this is our own analysis. I think this is a great starting point. Yes. But most significantly, as we try to localize these issues, I only see optimism for Brampton here.
Yeah.
Because it's all about protecting jobs. It's about
Yeah.
incentivizing manufacturers to build in Canada. And I think it's worth noting, right? We talk about Stellantis
Yeah.
as being the company in Brampton. But as we
There-
pointed out, we
exactly.
talked about Stellantis. It's those,
Yeah,
right? Whatever that
The-
factor is, they say 6 jobs for every job that's lost to the plant.
totally.
It's all
Yeah.
those supply chain jobs.
Yep.
It's all those logistics jobs.
Yes.
If the language in this document and in this strategy is to enhance the supply chain and to incentivize manufacturers to work Canadian broadly, this has the potential for so much more impact than just one assembly plant.
Yes.
And that's what really makes me optimistic about this, because
Yes.
the jobs that are affected in Brampton go well beyond Stellantis.
Yes.
And this creates opportunity for some of that recovery as well, and potentially, hopefully, even growth.
Absolutely. Okay, so generally, this is on the right track. We're optimistic.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
we'll revisit this a lot.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think let's commit to, before we come back for the next one of these, let's reconnect with our friends at Unifor.
Yes.
Let's get their read on it.
Yeah.
And then we can come back with, by then there'll be some more analysis.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit more deeply about what we think the deal means for Brampton.
Excellent.
But I think this is a great starting point.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
So the next topic, we want to talk about budget.
Yes, municipal budget. So,
All right.
All right. You've released a statement. I've put together a blog. I don't think we need to adjudicate sort of the claims
Sure.
that we're making again. But just as a summary for those who might have missed it, the budget came out on January 9th. We had a roundtable with economic development and the business community on January 12th. We took the weekend and a bit to read through a 600-page document, and we had a few different. I would call it commentary. We had commentary on the budget. In summary, we pointed out that the 1.5% tax increase, which the city has indicated, is the impact on the city's impact on the overall tax bill. We thought it was important to share with folks that this, when we're looking at year-over-year increases in the city's portion, this is actually a 3.9% increase. We also shared some concerns around the pausing of certain projects as a result of Bill 17's the Bill 17 legislation to defer development charge collection to occupancy as opposed to the approval part of the project. As a result of that,
Do you want to explain what that means? Like what the implication of that for folks who have been following?
Yeah.
That's a lot of language that might not make sense right away.
Sure. So Bill 17 is a provincial bill that allows developers to provide municipalities with development charges, which is a form of a municipal tax on development, right? Residential or commercial development. They're allowed to pay that at occupancy. So when the project is complete and the keys are ready to be handed over to the occupier, that's when those development charges can be transferred to the municipality.
And this is significant because traditionally,
Yes.
those fees are collected at the time that a project is approved.
Yes.
And those dollars are utilized to, traditionally, development charges can be used, development charge fees can be used and utilized in different ways.
Yeah.
But the primary application of them is to build the infrastructure
Yeah.
around those developments. So everything from sewers to roads to the public library are funded by those DCs.
Capital projects. Yeah.
So moving back the collection of DCs from the city effectively takes out a revenue stream during this time lag period.
That's
Over
right.
time, that should even out, but in this initial year,
Yeah.
the city is suddenly without a bunch of revenue that they were counting on.
Yeah.
So just to give some context
Yeah.
as to the why,
Appreciate
which
that.
therefore means the city is saying a bunch of these infrastructure projects, including some ones that are high priority for us from a public transit perspective, have now been put on pause.
Yes. One of those projects is the bus rapid transit preliminary design and TPAP on Queen Street and Highway 7.
Yeah.
So these are dedicated bus lanes to allow for express service, or not express service, but frequent service of buses on Queen Street. So that was a concern that we raised. We also raised some issues around, some clarity on how reserves are being used, balances, things like that. But the meta commentary was around the budget consultation process. And we were given effectively a weekend, 18 days, now turning into 20 plus. But ultimately, the period for consultation in our minds and in the minds of many of our volunteers and the members of the business community is that there is insufficient time for consultation on the budget. And so this is feedback that we shared with the Mayor's Budget Office I'm very happy with some of the progress coming out of those discussions.
Yeah.
Another issue I forgot to raise actually is the lack of assessment values for commercial and industrial.
Yeah.
We only have a residential tax bill included in this budget. Other municipalities include a commercial and industrial tax assessment. The budget office has indicated that they're working on a methodology for next year. So,
yeah, and just for the benefit of the listeners, the implication of that is that it's unclear what what contribution to the tax base is coming from industrial and commercial development.
Yes.
But more significantly, as a business organization, advocacy organization, it makes it difficult for groups like us to assess if we're getting good return on that investment as well.
Yes.
If all we know is that these are the general coffers and we don't really have a good sense, therefore, of are the needs of the business community being prioritized in the appropriate way, and are those investments being made in the way that is the most prudent given the resources that they have. So,
Yes.
for us to be able to have insight and provide constructive feedback and advocate on behalf of businesses, we really need to have a sense of what the numbers are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with those. Feel like wins to me. And another big win, I think, is sharing some of our advocacy over the past year, and in particular, some of the insight that we detailed in our transportation white paper around the need for 4 tracks on the Kitchener line. So again, for folks who are not aware, the Kitchener line is made up of Metrolinx owned passenger rail, but there's a segment of the track called the CN Halton sub from roughly Georgetown to Bramalea.
Yeah.
It's a stretch of tracks that are owned by CN. So they're utilized mainly for freight traffic. Now, there's an agreement that shares those tracks with Metrolinx to run passenger trains, GO trains. The Metrolinx has announced that they will be building a 3rd track in that stretch of the CN Halton sub. What we've been advocating for is to build, or rather study, a 4th track implementation that effectively eliminates all track sharing between freight and passenger.
Yeah.
So you could have that 15-minute, turn up and go subway-like service on the Kitchener line that the Lakeshore line is going to experience. So we shared that with council.
Yeah.
It was met with a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Doug Rieger from Brampton Transit also agreed with us in our assessment, so that was quite promising. And just a few days after that, at the provincial pre-budget consultation with the Brampton caucus, the city of Brampton joined us in advocating for 4 tracks. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, no, that's a huge one. And for anyone who's listening who has taken the GO train back, at Brampton in the evening and wondered why, excuse me, the train stops at Bramalea and you now have to get on a bus to get out to Mount Pleasant, or wondered why you can't get from downtown Brampton into downtown Toronto in the middle of the afternoon and have to instead go to Bramalea to catch that train. This is the why.
This is why.
Now, just to help people understand, because I think this is it's a little bit nerdy, but I think it's kind of interesting to get into.
Sure.
Why are we asking for a study of the 4th track and not just saying we want a 4th track? Because I think there's a nuance here that I think people might find interesting. We know we want the 3rd.
Yeah.
Why are we only asking for a study of the 4th when you and I know the 4th has so much value?
Yeah, I think part of it is it's an advocacy tactic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, asking upfront for a 4th track, I mean, that's billions of dollars essentially. I think understanding that it's much cheaper to do the due diligence of studying the track, looking at the specific placement of this track, knowing the implication on the downtown Brampton transit hub that is being explored. We know Railroad Street is going to be eliminated anyway to accommodate this new transit hub. Understanding sort of the dynamics that are in play with all of the development that's going to be happening in downtown Brampton anyway, we think that it's much more prudent to ask for a study of the 4th track, knowing that a 4th track makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that'll provide a lot more political will and capital to then action on a 4th track.
I fully appreciate you laying that out, because I think it's important to know, because we are. I don't want it to come across as though we're asking for a study of a 4th track because we're not passionate about the notion of the impact of that 4th track.
Right.
In fact, we're very passionate and resolute that this is the solution.
Yes.
And I think it's echoed by many on council and many on city staff. It's a political piece. If the concern is that if we demand the 4th track now, then what we risk doing is pushing back the implementation of the 3rd track.
The 3rd track.
We've got a commitment to the 3rd.
Yeah.
So let's build the 3rd. But to your point, while we're doing all the assessments of grading and environmental impact and all these other pieces, you may as well expand the study
Yeah.
to the fourth.
Yes.
But it's tactical. We don't want to slow down the implementation of the third
Yes.
because we've overplayed our hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, just to let
Yeah,
people
it's
understand how
important.
sometimes how these things play out.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we don't want it. It means we kind of have to walk through a process sometimes
Yeah.
when it comes to decision making.
And that's the game of advocacy
Yeah,
for sure.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to spend some time on the Howden bike lanes because
Yeah, this was fascinating.
it was.
So
yeah.
so the budget was to have been passed.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a window,
Yeah.
and we thought the budget was going to be passed a week ago.
Yes.
And just to let people know how the process works. So as Vijay talked about, there was an initial period for consultation with the business community. We received the budget on the 9th. The 13th was our official day to comment as a business entity. There were subsequent public opportunities, which again we deputed at. And then I think the city was really trying to stick handle to getting the budget completed before the end of January.
Yeah.
But among these public consultations, there were a lot more deputations, I think, than they had anticipated,
Yeah.
which has resulted, therefore, in the timelines being moved back. And now we anticipate the budget being passed tomorrow on the 6th. Among the deputations that took up a lot of the energy was bike lanes.
Yes.
And it was remarkable to me that this was where there was so much division and divisiveness, not just among council, but between the community, those advocating for and those advocating against bike lanes.
Yeah.
So with that context, let's talk about bike lanes.
Yeah, it was fascinating. So the effort. So just backing up a moment, the Howden bike lanes have been the subject of some controversy for the past year or so. Some residents, and in particular, Councillor Rod Power, have really led the charge on reconsidering these. What are they calling them? The concrete slabs that are separating the
but it's separated bike lanes.
bike lanes, between traffic and of course cyclists.
Yeah.
And the feeling, I should say, is that this is causing a lot of traffic in that area, and leaving residents to have to wait for traffic to clear to be able to go about their days. Now, city staff has sort of, as a result of some of those concerns, they've looked at some alternative design options as compromise solutions. Right. For example, moving the bike lane to within the boulevard, so on
above the curb.
Above the curb, grade separated, that sort of thing, to sort of allow for some more vehicle traffic. This citizen group, they took issue with the idea that one of the options was not getting rid of the bike lane entirely.
Yeah.
Right. And so this motion during this special meeting was really about getting rid of the bike lane infrastructure entirely and converting the bike lane to what are called sharrows.
Yeah.
So
it's a painted line.
It's a painted line. It's a vehicle lane.
Yeah.
But there are arrows indicating that a cyclist could also utilize that same lane.
Which makes it no different than literally any other road.
Exactly. I should mention, just due diligence, there is some vague discussion around a multi-use path of some sort on Howden. Unclear what those details are.
And to be clear, just for people following along too, this is a very limited portion of Howden. It's based from Dixie to Williams Parkway.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes, but it is the only
a critical artery linking that part of the city.
Exactly. And so I was actually surprised how newsworthy this was outside of Brampton.
Yeah.
I mean, Cycle Toronto was organizing around this. I saw folks on LinkedIn outside of the community talking about what they see as an abrogation of the active transportation plan, and to be clear, the motion passed, and everyone voted in favor of this motion except for a lone vote, which was Councillor Rowena Santos, who is a champion on council for active transportation.
That's right.
So it's tough. It's a big blow to the active transportation community. I mean, I'm personally not happy about that decision. I think. We've talked about this a lot, but if you're going to be in favor of public transit writ large, you also need to be in favor of cycling infrastructure, because we need those last mile connections to be able to make public options for transit viable.
Yeah.
So, What are your thoughts?
No, I very similar. Definitely disappointed.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, that so much of the commentary around the bike lane was about the inconvenience of those living in that stretch of Howden
Yeah.
is a bit of an artery that serves a number of communities, like small neighborhoods and cul-de-sacs and so forth.
Yeah.
And so much of the commentary was around the inconvenience of those motorists who had to wait to make a turn out of their neighborhood or into their neighborhood as part of their daily commute.
I just want to say that I think the language used was that they were imprisoned.
Imprisoned was the term that was used. I was trying to stay away from that because I didn't want the snicker, but I did
Right.
snicker in council when that came
Yeah.
up. And so to me, that was really the takeaway, because it really was therefore about entitlement.
Yeah.
Right? That those in vehicles have more entitlement.
Yeah.
And among the things that had to be clarified during these conversations was there was some perception that those in vehicles had more entitlement because they are taxpayers, because they contribute to the road infrastructure. Cyclists are residents as well.
That was pretty hilarious to me.
To that road infrastructure,
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of misconception.
Yeah.
But again, this notion that these drivers are entitled to more convenience than cyclists are entitled to safety, that I found difficult. The other parts I found in that were really interesting as well. I live in the end section.
Yeah.
I live in this area of the city,
exactly.
and I use these bike lanes.
Yeah.
And I can say that, those neighborhoods are hard to get in and out of, depending on the time of day. If I don't time it just right when I'm dropping my kids off to school, it's a bear of a drive sometimes to get out of my neighborhood and get out there. That has nothing to do with bike lanes. It has everything to do with the fact that we simply don't have enough appropriate infrastructure in our community to accommodate the vehicles we have, which is not helped by building more roads. That's inducing demand.
Induced demand. Yeah.
It's actually by creating more safe options for people. Why do I drive my kids to school? Because it's not safe for them to ride bikes. It's not easy for them to walk to school. That is part of the problem. The other part of it is that it's a reality, and I think we have folks in our city and our council who are just reluctant to say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
And that is, we just have not kept up with the pace of growth in this community, which has resulted in lots of people living in basement apartments and rental situations, because the affordability in our community has driven people to seek rental in basement apartments that are often illegal basement apartments. And these neighborhoods are overcrammed. If you drive down the neighborhood I live in at night, you'll see there's, even though street parking is technically not allowed, bylaw can't even enforce it. Cars are everywhere. Every lane is reduced. This has nothing to do with bike lanes.
Yeah.
This has everything to do with the fact that we just don't have the infrastructure, and we haven't made this community affordable.
Yeah.
And if that's the issue, then taking away bike lanes actually makes both of those problems worse.
Totally.
We've put more cars on the road,
Yeah.
and we're making it less safe and less affordable to live in Brampton. How is this helping? But to me, this is missing the forest for the trees.
Totally. I think it was particularly hilarious when there were individuals who suggested that individuals who drive cars are taxpayers.
Yes.
And those who ride bicycles are not.
We're just freeloaders somehow.
Yeah, and that there's an inherent elitism to that, which
100%.
I think is very discouraging. But also, a gentleman shared a really good insight that is kind of obvious, but really important, and that is that those who do not explicitly directly pay property tax still contribute to the tax base through the rent that they pay.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think is something that's often forgotten.
We don't talk about that.
municipal
We don't talk
politics.
about it that way. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The one thing as well, I'll give credit to Councillor Santos for a couple things in there.
Yeah.
One, for being steadfast in her support for active transportation.
Yeah.
She's a champion for it, and we have to give her credit for that. Two, that when the motion was put forward, that clearly she was not going to be able to get the votes to fight back on. She worked diligently through that meeting to get as many amendments and soften the language and create opportunities for future study, which I appreciate. She went down swinging. But the third thing I thought was great, because it hadn't occurred to me. I think so much of the energy around this bike lane issue, when you talk about Cycle Toronto and others, is because this is a provincial issue. This is what's happening in Brampton is a flashpoint of a larger dismantling of active transportation being led by the Ford government.
Yes.
One of those pieces that's also been led by the Ford government, and Councillor Santos connected these two things, and I thought in a way that was really smart, was when we took away the speed cameras, the need for bike lanes is actually more acute.
Yes.
Because we're simultaneously letting people speed again on these very roads that were taking away safe cycling opportunities.
Absolutely.
And that twofer is actually, that's where really the risk of life is now. You could almost make a justification for less bike lane infrastructure if we had more speed enforcement. I wouldn't advocate for it, but I think there's an intellectual conversation you could have.
Totally.
But to take away both those things at the same time, both of which are coming from the provincial government, to be clear, Brampton Council supported it on the bike lane. Brampton Council fought the speed cameras, to their credit.
Yes.
But those two things happening at the same time
it was a good link.
Is actually the perfect cocktail of danger if you're a cyclist.
You're absolutely right, and credit to Councillor Santos for that. I think her advocacy on this has been fantastic. What I find interesting as well is the same crowd. It's a similar point, but the same crowd who are supportive of the automated speed enforcement and want more traffic calming measures. A contingent of them oppose bike lanes.
Yes.
Which, to me, I mean, the most effective traffic calming mechanism is a bike lane.
100%.
So it doesn't make any sense. But the larger point, I think, is you're right to call out what I view as almost a culture war. Between the sort of pro vehicle crowd, right, which the provincial government seems to be acquiescing to, or maybe representing outright. And the crowd that is generally in support of more cycling infrastructure. Both of these communities, I think, are kind of growing further and further apart. And it's fascinating to see and kind of troubling.
No, and that's why I'd hoped council would have played more of a role to find some middle ground here. But it did become a polarizing issue. And unfortunately, to your point, 10 votes on council against, 1 vote for, or in this case, 10 votes for, 1 vote against, because it was about dismantling. But really, and
that's what surprised me.
How unanimous it was.
Well, how do you explain that?
And as someone who has been involved, in the active transportation community here, someone who is a cyclist, I will say on a personal note, it was really tough to see some of my friends so disheartened. Like you saw sagged shoulders and teary eyes walking out there, because this was a really disillusioning moment. After our community had been making so many steps in the right direction, as it pertains to not just active transportation, but micromobility and transit as a whole. Like Brampton, in many ways, is a success story in these areas. To take a step back like this just really felt like a gut punch, I think, for a lot of people.
Totally. Yeah. All right. Well, that's bike lanes. That's the budget.
We wanted to talk about subdivisions. So there was a news release that came out earlier this week around the approval of a subdivision in the northeast part of Brampton off McVean. 700 plus homes, 2 to 3 parks, I believe. Medium density housing. And
so medium density. It's not the single family home. It's sort of a multiplex, duplex, or where there's more density, more residents than just a single family home.
So I have a person. So I don't know why you I have a reason I wanted to talk about the story. I don't know why you put it on the list. So I just want to make clear: are you talking about the story, or are you talking about how the story was reported? Because I really want to talk about the latter.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. So this subdivision has been approved. And has the opportunity to start to proceed. I understand there's still some, there was a meeting of council as part of this process. And what I thought was interesting was that a number of people opposed this subdivision. And these were individuals, because if you're familiar with Brampton, this area of Brampton abuts on a number of estate homes. So these are larger, half acre, for the most part. I'm not great at size, but it kind of feels like that's the right size, quarter to half acre properties, but like big homes, multi-million-dollar properties, beautiful homes. And individuals who live in and own those homes are pushing back on the notion of this development happening immediately adjacent to them. And the implication being, the language being used is it's inappropriate development next to these estate homes. The implication obviously being this is bad for my property value. I spent a lot of money to buy a nice home. Now you're putting stuff here that's not as nice. And they're advocating for things like, institutional use or something of that nature, right? Maybe we put some parks, maybe we put a library there, but you don't want to put a bunch of townhomes next to my estate property. I'm not surprised by that. This is the nature of how things play out in City
Yeah.
Hall, NIMBYism
NIMBYs,
is a
yeah,
thing,
exactly.
and you're a landowner, and you have the right to oppose and defend your
Yes.
property value. That's how the process works.
Yes.
The thing I found interesting about this story is how the story was reported.
Yeah. The Brampton
So,
Guardian. Yeah.
The Brampton Guardian. So there's not a lot of news places in Brampton. I would argue we're not journalists, but we're one of the few news places in Brampton.
Yeah,
That's how few there
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
It's that we're one of them.
Yeah.
And the Brampton Guardian is among them, however. And they put out the report on this goings on at City Hall. And what they focused on in this story was that part of it.
Yeah.
That people were opposed to this development and the why they were opposed to this development. And they quoted, and I'm not picking on the individual, so I'm not going to cite the person who was cited in this. This is their right to oppose it.
Yeah.
But they profiled this individual and his concerns, who was this landowner, about why they were concerned about this development coming next door.
Yeah.
And my issue is, at the end of the day, what are we doing here if this is the side of the story that's being brought forward? This conversation around what we would all agree when we live in a community that's going through an affordability crisis, this feels like the exact kind of development that I would argue it's not going far enough, if anything. We want to see intensification.
Yes.
But medium density, that's a start.
Yes.
That might be an affordable housing option for a family. That might create a walkable community. 3 parks to 700 homes, that actually sounds pretty decent.
Yeah.
But we're not only opposing it, but when we're reporting that story with so few media outlets out there, the one media outlet that probably gets the most reach is talking about how people feel this development is unfair. And that, to me, perpetuates a perception of what development and planning in this community should be like at the expense of what we want at the expense of what it really should be like. We should be celebrating this, or at the very least, providing some balanced coverage. But to present it as like, oh, these poor people not getting their way because we're daring to put medium density homes next to their estate, I feel like that's sending all the wrong messages. And I'm just really disappointed that the Guardian didn't choose to provide a more balanced approach to this. Or quite frankly, if they're going to editorialize in what's good for the community, which is creating more affordable housing options.
Yeah, it was a very weird story, and
Yeah.
it felt dated, to be honest with you. I think it almost tells me that maybe there's just not enough organizing with the YIMBY crowd in Brampton, because from the Guardian's perspective, like this is how I'm sort of choosing to interpret it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the only story to tell, right? And there wasn't enough of a voice on the other side saying that actually this development will be good for the community.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road. We have these MTSA policies, right? Transit-oriented development, all of that. I would argue this is the real test where you don't have a major transit station area. Are you committed to density and intensification? And I would argue more so because you can't take an LRT or a bus rapid transit to a destination to do groceries or to go to the park or whatever, go to the library. More so, you need this mixed-use development in this area. And especially if we're thinking, Bovaird is eventually going to have higher order transit. It's not being explicitly talked about yet, but it's coming.
It's the logical next thing after Queen Street.
Yes,
it's the logical next one.
You need to plan now. Because this is coming whether we like it or not, right? So to me, it seems, I hope that there is support for this project. And, I hope to see more of this. And another point, Mike Moffat has a podcast. He talks about, in a recent episode, the death of the starter home.
Yes.
Young people cannot afford the McVean Castlemore homes. Right? We don't have
young people. I can't afford them in my 50s. These are not for everybody.
Exactly. We need these 1.5 2-bedroom units.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And for me, the take. And so as always, you're the more generous reading of these situations. You're probably right, and that this is a reflection of where the voices were loudest. And if that's the interpretation, let's go with that. Then what this speaks to is a different issue, but just as an important issue, kind of coming back to where I started this segment, the lack of media. Because if our, again, you and I are not journalists. We're just two folks talking. But if our journalists don't have the resources to go and do the research and present both sides, then yeah, let's give everyone the benefit of the doubt here. They attended a council meeting. This is what they heard in council, and this is what they're reporting.
Yeah.
But what responsible and properly funded,
Yes.
I'm not picking on the reporter, I'm picking on the
Yeah.
system here now, reporting would have been is to say, well, let's have a conversation with Steve Ganesh
Yes.
and the Commissioner of Planning and
Yes.
talk about, well, why are we doing this process here?
Yes.
Have a conversation with one of the developer, and say, what is your interest in
Yeah.
developing this
Yeah.
particular type of community?
Totally.
So maybe it's not a reflection of the journalistic bias. Maybe it's a reflection of the journalistic limitation.
Yes. Yes.
Nevertheless, to me, it's still it's a bummer. Either way, it's a bummer.
It's a bummer. There's no way to slice this to make this,
No, and
optimistic.
then I mean, this is not our story clearly, but with earlier this week, the news of the Washington Post, laying off 30% of its journalistic workforce as well.
Yes.
Like, these are not good times for journalism, and these are these little ways that we start to see the cracks.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about journalism, the weakness of journalism is in its bias. But sometimes it's inability to have rigor.
Yeah.
These stories need the resources to be reported on properly. So
Totally.
again, let's give the reporter the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is all they had before a deadline because they didn't have the resources to do it.
Yes.
Either way, it's a disservice to the readers and the community when all we present is one side of a story
Absolutely.
that, quite frankly, runs contrary to, I think, what's best for this community.
Yeah. Okay, great, wonderful. Well, that brings us to the next piece of this. I think, speaking of, we spoke about this a little bit, but the idea that Brampton is, I think, underreported in terms of its population.
Yeah.
And so much of our challenges are a result of our underreported population and the infrastructure that hasn't kept up with the population increase.
Yeah.
You had some insights around population statistics.
Yeah, and it's just more a spitbally piece. This is something I think I would really like for you and I in our day-to-day work to dig into and really try to understand. I actually think this is a huge advocacy opportunity for us.
I think so.
Much more deeply, and I don't know what the solutioning is. I think it takes a little more study from our end to figure that out. But I feel like there's something here. And broad strokes, because this is I'm not speaking to every instance here, but generally speaking, there's a challenge that's presented in everything when we talk about labor statistics, productivity statistics, when we talk about how LMIAs and allocation of work permits happen. Like, there's lots of ramifications that are the direct result of communities like Brampton, but also Mississauga, Vaughan, Pickering, all being lumped into a broad bucket that's called the GTA.
Yeah.
And when we see data being reported, and we've seen it in multiple circumstances, it came up a lot when we talked about immigration and LMIAs. I was at an event this morning where they're talking about forecasting for the manufacturing sectors here in Ontario, and the nuance of what these communities offer, not just Brampton. Obviously, our voice is for Brampton, but I say this on behalf of all of these communities in the 905 ring, that we don't get the opportunity to advocate for what our communities need. We don't get the opportunity to celebrate what our communities achieve. And we don't have the opportunity to effectively position our community for future success if we don't have numbers that actually highlight what's happening in our community.
Yeah.
When we're thrown in this big bucket of the GTA, then when we talk about allocations for work permits for certain sectors, well, those jobs aren't evenly distributed across all of Toronto. Manufacturing logistics jobs are much more in Brampton and Vaughan than they are in Pickering or Mississauga, and certainly not much more than they are in the core of Toronto.
Yes.
But when we're allocating work permits and opportunities for people to come into the country on work visas, we don't differentiate, we don't delineate. Yeah. When we're looking at, where's the forecast for investment opportunities in these communities, when we're just lumped in with a Toronto GTA window, then we're not able to understand where the specific opportunities are to attract investment, whether it be foreign or domestic, if you're not able to talk about these communities in a more nuanced fashion.
Yeah.
And in some cases, the work is being done. You do a lot of work directly, and we as an organization with the Metamorphosis Network who's specifically working on this issue as it pertains to the social sector of breaking out those numbers to what they mean to Peel Region and within Peel Region, the 3 different communities.
Yes.
We are seeing, the city of Brampton, and I trust other cities, doing their own due diligence to try to bring forward the numbers that matter to them when it comes to investment attractions. I know the city of Brampton, for instance, we saw it again at our mayor's luncheon earlier this week. Patrick Brown was able to talk about specific things that were Brampton numbers. But in the main, when we talk about policy decisions, we are lumped into this bigger mush of other communities. And I really don't know what my point is here, other than just to observe my frustration on being able to do something for my community when no one will talk about my community in a distinct way.
You've identified a real challenge with policymaking for Brampton and in Brampton because so much of policy relies on the StatsCan census cadence, right? So we're relying on 2021 numbers.
We're always years behind.
Yes. And we're also the CMA structure, right? The Census Metropolitan Area sort of categorization of things means that we're continuously lumped in with multiple municipalities, with the city of Toronto, right? With millions and millions of other people that do not live and work and reside generally in our borders. And so this is fine, and there are reasons for this for a number of very legitimate methodological reasons and constraints, but to the extent that we can drill deeper, we should. You mentioned LMIA. Much of our challenges with LMIA rest on the fact that, one, it's not sector specific, and two, they're utilizing an unemployment rate number that is tied to a CMA, which vastly diverges from the local context. Right. So you've identified something that's a real challenge, and just this morning, Sean Maher and a few others, Angela Carter as well, from the Metamorphosis Network, talked about the ways in which Peel, to your point, is underfunded with respect to social services. An interesting insight that they shared is Brampton is an example of a newer urban center, right? And when we compare Brampton to older urban centers like Toronto and Hamilton,
I'm thinking Hamilton. Yeah.
Even though we have a higher population than Hamilton, right? We are per capita worse off.
That's right.
Because a lot of the policy lies not on people but on infrastructure.
Right.
So childcare funding is not attached to the actual children; it's attached to space.
How many institutions and spaces and so forth. That is a great articulation of what I feel but don't know how to talk about.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's because I went to school in Hamilton, so I have a very clear understanding of what Hamilton is like. I still have friends there. I go there regularly, and I've always struggled to reconcile how a city, basically less than half the size of Brampton, has so much more available to it in terms of opportunity, resource, and infrastructure. But you're right. If historically it just developed in a different way, and therefore the allocation is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know where we go with this. I don't know how we change that in a big way or a small way. But I think it's something I want to reflect on. And
for sure,
in the work that we do, is there some opportunity for us to find better ways to get reporting around Brampton, or at least advocate for, in specific contexts, better reporting around the numbers of Brampton, so we can be more effective as a community in advocating for ourselves.
One more point on that. Sean did point me to population estimates from StatsCan. So StatsCan acknowledges that population, especially population, which is only one piece of this, I guess varies based on when you do the actual census data collection. And so what they do is they do post and pre-census data collection activity, and they try to get a more accurate population number.
Right.
So they actually have a real-time clock for population variances throughout the country.
Got it.
So when we want to do our own advocacy, we can take a look at some of the population estimates from StatsCan for Brampton.
Cool. We learned a thing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll park that last conversation around our speculation around local by-elections for another time, because I think we're coming up an hour. But because I want to create space for, I know you love finishing up our podcast with your media question of the week. Is there any media that's broken through for you or anything that's on your mind? Oh, you look like you're thinking.
Yeah.
Do you need me to go first?
Yeah, you should go first. I forgot to think about this. Yeah.
see, now I know because you stumped me a couple of times to actually prepare for this.
Yes, good.
So 2 things for me.
Okay.
One is a serious one, and one was just like a more emotional one. I don't know. So we're different generations.
Yeah.
What does the Muppet Show mean to you?
Like Kermit the Frog.
Yeah. Do you have any like affinity? Like, is that a thing from your
100%,
childhood?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I wasn't sure if that had like cultural content.
No,
Because for
sure.
me, at the time I grew up in the 70s and 80s, like that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
And so Disney has relaunched the Muppet Show.
Oh, really?
And I watched the first episode of the new Muppet Show last night, and it's the old like format and everything. Like they're running a variety show, all the hijinks that ensue, and it just gave me all the feels.
Oh, wow.
And there's this moment where the voices aren't quite, Kermit's, they'll never replicate Jim Henson's voice.
No, they need Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. Like there's something where Kermit's always like 5% off. It takes you a minute to get into it.
Yeah.
But my goodness, it gave me all the feels. So just in general, that wasn't what I was planning on talking about.
Yeah.
But if anyone is like of our generation and has nostalgia for the Muppet Show, watch the Muppet Show. It was great. It made me very, very happy last night to watch that.
Yeah.
But the thing I've been that I'm really excited about, I'm only halfway through the book, but I want to start talking about was because again, talking about things that help me articulate things I feel but haven't been able to put words to. One of the challenges that we have is we do lots of events, and part of what we do as part of those events are land acknowledgements as part of our commitment to truth and reconciliation. Yeah. And the challenge for me is not in doing them. The challenge for me is how I feel about them myself and trying to provide context. Because we are a community of newcomers, I want to make sure that people feel that the responsibility towards truth and reconciliation is felt among those of us who may not have been traditionally part of the systemic challenges and exploitation of those in First Nations communities. Yeah. And I feel that sometimes. I've had these conversations with people, and so I go out of my way, and you've unfortunately had to observe me do land acknowledgements, where I work really hard to try to make sure it feels contextual to the moment. I was listening to the Brown History podcast, and this is an older episode, but I finally got around to listening to it. And the author that they had profiled was a gentleman named Nishant Upadhyay, and he wrote a book called Indians on Indian Land.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's a book around the notion of, and he's writing from a Canadian context, of what it means to be a newcomer to a country and what your role in truth and reconciliation is. And he really approached it as someone from the Indian diaspora who came to Canada, trying to understand what truth and reconciliation meant to him. And in doing his dive into it, really drawing connections, which we have done as well. We've had these conversations, and I've included it. This is actually how I talk about it when I do land acknowledgements, is that those of us who come from communities like India, we have our own experience with colonialism. But he's gone further and really tied these notions of truth and reconciliation in the Canadian context to reconciling issues of the caste system and the impact of colonialism to countries like India and those from the South Asian continent. Wow. And it's a really interesting dive into this issue of where is my really drawing a level of connection to what people from India diaspora communities feel and strengthening that relationship to First Nations and Indigenous communities in Canada. So I'm only about halfway through the book, so I may have more to say to you offline when I actually finish it. But this has been a fascinating read to me because it's the first time I've actually found someone, and he's coming from an academic context, talking about this issue that I think a lot about, but I haven't really been able
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Have someone really bring it forward to me in a way that allowed me to challenge my ideas a little bit more. So I'm just sharing. I like the Brown History podcast in general. Yeah. But this book has been a great read for me so far, and I'll flip it to you when I'm done if you're interested.
Please do, because
Indians on Indian land.
I'm also from a similar adjacent diasporic community, and this is something that I think about as well. Yeah. When I, for example, when I do Moksha every year, the music festival, I always try and tie in this history of colonialism to the experience of the music, because I don't. The music is not apolitical; it is deeply political, and I'm always trying to square these different dots, and so I appreciate that.
It's there. And again, I struggle, and you did a beautiful job of that this year, by the way, and you do a lot of great educational stuff. The way you use the screens and enhance your words on the stage there. But this is a piece I've never quite been able to articulate how, and I'm trying to help others connect with this idea that I kind of feel, have someone actually do some like analysis and actually articulate it more deeply, who's actually Indian, right? Because part of it for me too is that fundamentally I'm a Canadian of Indian descent. So I'm always feel like a little bit of an imposter in this conversation as well. I'm not really fully a Canadian in the institutional sense of truth and reconciliation, nor am I an Indian in the fully cultural sense. So having someone articulate this for me who is actually of Indian descent has been really helpful.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Anyway, what's yours?
So two. The first is, as I brought up ad nauseum, now I'm part of the Maitri Policy School, and I will be in this program for several months. And last week, I attended their opening retreat, and it was facilitated by Kathleen Wynne, the former premier. And this piece of media that we all consumed during this retreat was a really interesting video series, documentary series, published by the Dais at TMU. And it detailed the advocacy journey and policy implementation of essentially free tuition through OSAP, student loans. Yeah. And this was sort of one of the last policy contributions of the Wynne government. And I think at the time, I was a student at the time, so I was very sort of jazzed about this. But I didn't realize the complexity but also the simplicity of this policy, and just how miraculous the various factors of both government, civil society, and industry came together to really produce this beautiful legislation. So the Ontario Undergraduate Student Association, USA, gave the president, the Treasury under Wynne's government, this fantastic proposal that essentially allowed for there not to be any net new spending. So reforming the tax credit system in Ontario.
I understand the implication. Yes.
To now a grant system to low income households. So because the tax credits disproportionately benefit wealthier Canadians, wealthier Ontarians. But if you sort of change the incentive structure and provided a grant instead, there's no net impact on your finances, but you have a social impact.
The capacity to bring so many more people in.
And it was just so inspiring to see. And then you saw, so we'll definitely link this somewhere, but then you saw the machinery of government having to work together. So the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Education having to come together to create this proposal, and the cultural differences between these two ministries, and it coming together in this really beautiful sort of way that only can really happen through advocacy and policy.
I was gonna say this is like the ultimate sort of policy story, because this is impacting people on this massive scale. But it's actually a highly technical issue that need to be resolved in order to make that happen.
It was this cataclysm of all these things that we touch in our work all the time.
Very cool.
But it was like a success story.
What's it called?
I forget what it's called, but it's from the Dais.
Okay.
And we'll link it
into the thing.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
awesome.
And I'll send it to you as well. But it was really interesting. It's a series of like 3-minute videos. That
like vignettes almost.
Yes.
Oh,
exactly.
I like Canada history moments.
I
like that.
Seriously. And then little pop-ups come like if you hear a term like, I don't know, the Pink Palace or whatever, there's a little pop-up that comes up, and you can click into it and get an in-depth explanation of that term. So it's very...
So even my little attention span could follow it. That's amazing.
It's interesting. And then the second piece of media I want to share is my partner over the holidays gifted me a book called The Serviceberry. And you know the book Braiding Sweetgrass?
Yes, of course.
Same author.
Yeah.
And it's a smaller book.
Angel loves that book, by the way.
So I hadn't read either. I started reading The Serviceberry, and I'm just like emotional and verklempt, reading this material, because and I haven't finished it for the record, but the insight that I want to share is the idea of the gift economy, and just how your attitude towards a thing changes based on whether or not it's a gift. And this idea that if you buy a pair of socks, for example, you don't have no emotional attachment to those socks. You wear them, whatever. There's a hole, you throw them out. There's just zero attention or emotional attachment to the thing that you bought. But if someone gifts you a pair of socks, and it's a special friend, and it could be just regular Hanes socks, whatever. But there's this emotional attachment that you impute on it. you then take care of it in a different way. And taking that insight and applying it to other facets of our life, whether it's the homes that we live in, the land that we're on.
I think about the work that we do here.
The work that we do
We
here.
always
exactly.
talk about we don't want our work to feel transactional for our members.
It's a gift, yeah. So I've started to really think about everything that I do and that I'm given in this life as a gift, and how my relationship with that thing changes as a result.
That's
of that.
such a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
Okay, that I'm getting. That's a book I want to read.
Yeah.
And I have read Braiding Sweetgrass, and that's a fantastic book,
Yeah.
which is also highly emotional and
Yeah.
kind of a devastating book to read. But that's okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful, and again, Indigenous authorship and insights riddled throughout that book. So.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
That feels really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've been over an hour, so maybe we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah.
And we'll pause. So thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you once again to Derek for our awesome new intro music.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, Josh, for helping put this together. And you may have noticed this episode and the last, we didn't have a sponsor to thank. So if you're here and you love the work that we're doing and you want to help support it, I'll let you know that we are actually looking for a new 2026 sponsor for the podcast. So if you're a Brampton business or just a generous benefactor who wants to support the Never Board of Trade podcast, let us know.
Yes.
And we'd be happy to give you all sorts of credit and love as we do these episodes over the course of the year. But with that, we'll be back in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you all soon.